Jen, I think I will start and just go through some of the generalities while we're waiting for people to come, because we have a long program tonight. Uh, can everybody hear me? I'm
Yeah.
assuming you can. Good. I'm Nancy Brumback. I'm the League's legislative specialist for good governance bills, which is what this bill comes under. So just briefly, town meeting is the legislative body for town governments in Massachusetts. It's where budgets and bylaws and new regulations are passed. And there are two different formats for town meeting in Massachusetts. One is representative town meeting, and in that case, the town is divided into districts, and each district elects a representative to town meeting, and those representatives vote on everything that comes before town meeting. Towns that use representative town meeting can already hold their meetings in a hybrid or remote format. They've been able to do that since the pandemic started. But about 250 towns in Massachusetts use what's called the open town meeting format. And that's where all registered voters in town can and are encouraged to attend town meeting, and they all can vote on all the warrant articles before town meeting. Right now, the law requires that those open town meetings be in person only. But it's very difficult for some people to attend these meetings, especially parents with small children who might want to vote on the school budget, or older residents, or people with certain disabilities, or people who have to go to work the next day. In Sudbury, where I live, our open town meeting in May ran Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights from 7:30 to 10:30 every night. I know Carlisle's took an entire Saturday, 6 hours or so. So it's not always easy for people to go to open town meeting. Because of that, the town of Whan a while back appointed a committee that's been working on a way to allow secure, remote participation in open town meetings. And the Whan Committee will be presenting the concept they have been working on during this webinar. The law needs to be changed to allow remote or hybrid participation in open town meetings before Whan can test this idea any further or interest a company in working towards an actual product. So Bill number H2274 would allow, but not require, hybrid or remote access and participation in open town meeting, and LWVMA is supporting that bill. Tonight, we're first going to hear from Representative Carmine Gentile, the sponsor of H2274, before turning the program over to Miranda Jones, who is the Whan Town Moderator, and Dave Bernstein of the Whan Electronic Voting Subcommittee, which they called ELPIS. We're going to ask you to hold your questions until the end of the presentation. It's a lengthy presentation, and we want to get all the way through it, and some of your questions may be answered by the time it's finished. And then when we get to the Q&A period, enter your questions in the chat, and we will take questions from the chat only because, again, we have limited time and we want to get to as many questions as possible, maybe combining ones that are the same question. So wait till the end and then enter your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. And now we start with Representative Gentile. Want to talk a little bit about your bill?
Well, thank you very much, Nancy, and good evening. My name is Carmen Gentile, and I'm a member of the Sudbury League of Women Voters and state representative representing the 13th Middlesex District, which includes Sudbury and portions of Concord, Lincoln, Marlborough, and Wayland. So I filed House 2274, an act authorizing remote participation at town meeting in January at the beginning of the current session. I also filed a home rule petition for the town of Wayland, House 2272, an act authorizing remote participation at town meetings in the town of Wayland. Both of these bills were sent to the Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, and on February 27th of this year, they were sent there. The co-chairs are both new for the committee, and neither bill has been scheduled yet for a hearing. Now, after these bills were received in committee, we were able to have a meeting with the House Chair, Jack Patrick Lewis, where Dave Bernstein, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, of the of the Elvis Committee was able to give a comprehensive presentation to Chair Lewis and the staff. Now, the House and Senate have agreed on rules for our joint committees. Under these rules, members of each chamber will decide whether to act favorably on bills submitted by members of their respective chambers, and bills favorably voted will be released for further action in that chamber. So if House members on the committee vote favorably on this legislation, it will move to the House Committee on Policy and Steering, and that committee will decide which committee to send it to next. Ultimately, House bills need to be received by the Committee on Bills in third reading in order to finally go to the floor for a final vote. Now, while House 2274, the statewide bill, is a new file, a home rule bill from Wayland was also filed in the previous session, and that bill was sent to study. In advocating for that previous bill, a presentation was made to the Attorney General's office, which oversees our open meeting law and the conduct of our town meetings. Dave Bernstein gave that presentation, and the Attorney General's office had no problem whatsoever with Wayland's plan as presented by Dave at that meeting. And Secretary Galvin has deferred to the AG's office because it's really within the Attorney General's purview. I will say that at its June town meeting, the town of Concord voted for remote town meeting, and I anticipate filing a home rule petition with Representative Cataldo, who represents some of the precincts in that community. I'd encourage other towns to similarly pass home rule petitions. The more towns that do so, the higher the likelihood that the legislature would enact a pilot program for those towns, probably before enacting a statewide legislation. Thank you very much, Nancy, and we'll turn this over to Dave.
Actually, it's going to be me. Thank you, Representative Gentile. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Miranda Jones. I am the moderator for the town of Wayland, and I'm here with Dave Bernstein, who is our chair of our Elvis Committee. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event and for coordinating it. I truly appreciate everyone's time and your willingness to listen to how Wayland got to where we are with remote participation. So, Dave, if you don't mind sharing your screen, we have a PowerPoint presentation, or a slide deck, as the current generation calls it. And so our agenda for this evening is this. I'll give you an introduction as to how the town of Wayland got to where we are today. Then Dave will launch into the technical impediments that come with remote participation and how the Elvis Committee has answered those impediments. We'll then move into the legal impediments, which Nancy has already touched upon, and then what the action items are that are needed. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. So I've been the moderator since 2023 in the town of Wayland. So I inherited this resolution that has been filed repeatedly at our town meetings, in that the town has voted to have a home rule petition filed with the legislature, state legislature, in order for us to be allowed to have remote participation. Wayland is open town meeting. It has approximately 10,000 registered voters. We instituted electronic voting in 2011. Prior to electronic voting, the means by which Wayland voters voted open town meeting was the shout out vote, which, for those of you who have that vote, probably recognize that voting in this manner is very public vote. It is typically not particularly accurate. And because of the lack of accuracy, often people have to do a standing count, which just drags on the process. So back in 2011, under our prior moderator, the Elvis Committee was formed in order to implement electronic voting. And here you see before you a picture of what the handsets look like that the Wayland voters use at open town meeting. And so we collected the Wayland High School field house. Everyone's handed out a handset, and when we started electronic voting, it changed the whole nature of voting at open town meeting for the town of Wayland. Our objectives were to have a private vote, to have an accurate vote, and to speed up the vote. And all of the objectives have been met, so that periodically there'll be a warrant article in which the town is to reaffirm whether or not they want electronic voting, and it always overwhelmingly passes. The town has embraced electronic voting. And with these handsets, we have, in terms of the security of the vote, all the messages are encrypted. There is nothing connected to the internet with electronic voting. And the moderator can initiate a real-time audit before the warrant article is closed, so we can determine whether or not the electronic voting is accurate. So it has been an incredible help at town meeting for our town. And as a result, as you can see on the PowerPoint, the voters are making decisions on the merits. They're not worried about how they stand and vote in front of their neighbors or their loved ones. It's a very, very private vote. And so there's no concern about consequences about how they may have voted on an article. No one knows but them how they voted. Town meeting is far more relaxed. It is deliberate. There is still an enormous amount of public debate that goes on at Wayland Town Meeting. Quite many questions are asked. But however, we have shortened our annual town meeting by an average of 3 hours, which is a lot. We typically do town meeting in 2 nights now. A couple of years ago, we did it in 1, but prior to electronic voting, it was generally 3 nights, or sometimes every once in a while we would do a Sunday. But it would be 3 different sessions of town meeting. Wayland was the first open town meeting to have electronic voting in 2011. Since then, there are now over 70 Massachusetts towns that utilize electronic voting. And so it has really taken off, and other towns have learned the efficacy of using electronic voting. Dave, if you could move to the next slide. So what I'd like to point out, though, is that at our typical town elections, we get an average number of about 2,100 voters come to actually vote in person, with having 10,000 registered voters. Town meeting, however, we have a lot fewer people come. We have approximately 600 voters, and that doesn't mean 600 voters at each session. That means overall 600 voters with repeaters in there. And so one of the reasons we have been talking about remote participation is, could we now take electronic voting, which has worked so well in our town for the last 14 years, and extrapolate it and move it forward into the 21st century and have remote participation? So Dave, if you could advance the next slide. Why would we do this? Well, we want more people to participate. In particular, we're looking at the segment of our population that has been disenfranchised from participating in open town meeting for a variety of reasons. Certainly, we have our certain segment of the population that have disabilities that limit their ability to come in person and participate. Some people have mobility issues. Some people are unable to drive at night. Some people have hearing issues. So even if they could get to the facility, to the field house, they wouldn't be able to hear the proceedings. I know there's other ways to accommodate that. I recognize that. With remote participation, we would solve a lot of problems. Additionally, besides people who have physical disabilities that preclude them from coming to town meeting, we do have a number of working parents in our town, and so people struggle with childcare issues. While we do have a group that offers on-site childcare at town meeting, most people don't want to bring their children to be watched at night in some room in the high school, because the kids need to go to bed. So while it's nice that the childcare is offered, it's not a cure-all, that's for sure. Additionally, we have a number of people in our town who are caregivers and therefore cannot leave other members of their household for a variety of reasons. And then there's people like me who travel for work. And so if we were allowed to have remote participation, we could see that for a lot of people, a lot of segments of our population in our town, they would be able to participate. And for years, Wayland voters have been asking, if we can shop and bank via the internet, why can't we participate in town meeting via the internet? And so Elvis has since not moved on from electronic voting, but has now tackled the issue of how do we make remote participation possible. The goal, of course, being that we will increase the participation in town meetings so that we'll have a more representative population voting on the various warrant articles. Dave, if you could move, thank you. So how does electronic voting work at Wayland Town Meeting? We have a voting system. We use the company OTI, and they bring their voting system in, and electronic, the handsets are issued as people register. The registered voters come in and they register for town meeting. As they sign in, they're given a handset, also known as a clicker. And the voting system stays completely within town meeting. There is no internet involved with electronic voting. And so, and as I mentioned before, I can do a real-time audit if I need to. We have had incredible success with electronic voting in the last 14 years. So now we want to expand that. On the next slide. With remote participation, what would we do? Well, now we would be incorporating the internet in order for our remote participants to participate. So what we need is a software program, and we need the internet, and we need either people can use their iPhones if they have their smartphones if they have them, or they can use iPads, I believe. And Dave's going to go into the technical aspects of remote participation. But we're not looking at just having people at home or wherever they happen to be participating in town meeting just by voting. What we're hoping to do is create a software program and create a process by which those people who are not physically present at town meeting can listen. They can speak at it. They can speak at the pro microphone, at the con microphone. They can ask questions. They can move. They can make motions, like motions to amend, motions to terminate debate, and they can also vote. So we're looking for the complete town meeting experience for people who are participating remotely. So that's where we're at. Now Dave is going to take over for me, and he's going to explain all of the technical stuff that I don't understand. And then we welcome questions and truly appreciate your coming. You're all coming to hear this. So Dave, if you want to move on.
Thank you very much, Miranda. So when Elvis was asked to investigate remote participation, whether or not it was possible, and if so, how could we do it? We started by identifying the technical impediments, and we found 4 of them. By the way, Elvis is a total of 7 people, including me, people I've worked with for the last 14 years. Our town clerk is also a member, and the presentation you're about to see, the rest of it is the product of that team, and they're just great. So let's go through the impediments. The first is, how do we make it really simple so that everybody can use it, ideally without training? How do we detect the fact that there's been an internet outage, maybe something as mundane as a power failure, that has disconnected some of the people who were participating remotely? Everybody's concerned about using the internet to convey votes. It's basically a cesspool. So how do you know that votes aren't going to be tainted somehow? And how do you detect and deter impersonation, where one person is voting for another? So we'll go through each of these one at a time. So to make it really simple, at least to start, we're saying use your own smartphone or tablet. It can be an Android smartphone or an iPhone. Same thing with the tablet. Anything that has a web browser is the only requirement. Now you might ask, well, why can't we use a desktop computer? Well, eventually you will be able to, but to start, we want to keep things really simple. And desktop computers aren't simple. They don't all have microphones or cameras. They're not appliances. Whereas every smartphone, every tablet has a microphone and a video camera, makes it really easy for people to participate. We also don't want people sharing the same device because that would create time pressure when it comes time to vote. Now, not everybody on the planet or in Eastern Massachusetts or Western Massachusetts, or all of Massachusetts has a smartphone or a tablet. The last statistic I saw said that in the United States, 92% of all people have a smartphone, but we can provide loaners to people who don't have one. So it's not a requirement that you personally own a smartphone or tablet to be able to remotely participate, but a lot of people will have them. So say you want to participate remotely. It begins by registering with the town clerk. You trot down to the town clerk's office and you check in just like you would at town meeting on premises. You state your name and your address, and you will receive a piece of paper with 3 things printed on it: a voter code, which is like a username, a password, and an audit code. And I'll explain the use of the audit code in a minute. So you have this piece of paper, it's got information on it that only you have, your voter code, your password, and your audit code. And that's what you need to be able to participate remotely. We'll probably need a reservation system to avoid a last minute rush of everybody wanting to register with the town clerk 5 minutes before the deadline, but those are available off the shelf and easy to implement. You just go to the web page and pick a time slot. Okay, so now how do we make it really simple? Well, first of all, there's no software installation required. It's just a web page. And the URL for the web page is the same for everybody, no matter which device they happen to have. So you go to the same URL, and that's how you interact with how you remotely participate in town meeting. The key aspect of the user interface design that you're about to see is that there is one button for each activity. One button to check in, one button to request to speak, one button to vote, one button to audit your vote, one button to get help, and one button to indicate that you're going to leave town meeting. So here we are at the beginning. You typed in the URL for Wayland Town Meeting in this case, and you're prompted for your voter code and your password, which is printed on the little piece of paper you got from the town clerk. So you enter those two and you click the check-in button. And now you're engaged in audio, video, real-time conversation with a member of the town staff, in this case, Wayland. And you basically check in. You state your name and address, just like you would on premises. And the Wayland or the town staff member verifies that you are in fact a registered voter, and you're now authorized to participate in town meeting remotely. That's all it took. Okay, so here we are. We're in the middle of Article 11, and our remote participant is shown the current article that's being discussed, the motion of that article, the main motion in this case, and what we're doing, which is we're discussing it. So at this point, there's a choice. One thing that a town might decide is that it wants real-time transcription. That is, to have whatever is being said appear in real time as text on screen. This helps people who have hearing disabilities. You can just see what's being said. It even helps people who don't have hearing disabilities to focus and understand what's going on. Alternatively, you might want to have town meeting video appear here. And some towns, that would be a great thing. In our town, we have a cable channel that broadcasts town meeting video. So we might opt for the real-time transcription, but that's a choice that each town would make. So now our remote participant whose screen we're staring at over her shoulder decides that she wants to speak because she wants to make an amendment. So she clicks the speak button, and she's immediately presented with a set of choices. There are 6 reasons why you might want to speak at town meeting. You might want to speak in favor of the current motion. That's the pro button. You might want to oppose the current motion with the con button. You might want to ask a question. You might want to terminate debate. You might want to make an amendment to the current motion. You might want to raise a point of order. And you might change your mind and decide you didn't want to make a request after all, in which case you can withdraw it. But you've got 6 choices to make as to why you want to speak. In our case, our remote participant's going to push the amend button. And when she does that, she's immediately informed that her request to amend awaits moderator recognition. So her screen is telling her that her request has been received. Now we're going to switch gears and look at the console that the moderator has, probably a tablet. So here we are at the top, it's Article 11, and she's looking at speaker requests because she's pushed the speaker button down there at the bottom. And what she sees is a chronological list of people who have requested to speak. The list is in chronological order. So Boris requested first. He's local. He's on premises, as is Emmanuel. Angela is remote, pushed the request to amend. That's who we're looking. That's whose handset we're looking at. And we see there are 2 other participants, one remote and one local, who have added to the queue. So there are 5 people on the queue. We see the order they're in, and we see why each one wants to speak. Above, we can also see that there's an indication that no one has raised a point of order and no one has attempted to call the question. If someone had done that, then clicking on those would indicate who was the source of the point of order or who was trying to call the question. So in this case, the moderator is going to decide to enable Angela to raise her amendment, even though she wasn't first. So she clicks the amend button. And when she does that, Angela, the remote participant, is now prompted to offer her amendment by speaking into her device's microphone. She's now addressing all of town meeting, remote and on premises. And she has a nice little indicator there telling her how much time she has remaining. In this case, 75 seconds, and that will count down one at a time. So now we've seen listening and now we've seen speaking, 2 of the major aspects of participating in town meeting. Everybody gets to be able to look at the queue as well. So now we're back looking at remote participants. The remote participants can push the queue button and see the queue. You can see the same thing that the moderator sees, all the people who are queued up and whether they're local or remote using the abbreviation L or R and why they wish to speak. This is an important capability because some people are concerned that if 2 or 3,000 people show up at town meeting, we'll be inundated with more people wanting to speak to it. But as someone put it well, having more people doesn't mean there will be more points of view. And if you can see who's in the queue already and you know some of those people and what they're going to say, then that enables you to decide whether you really need to speak as well. Because if someone is already going to make the point that you're planning to make, then you can sit back and wait to see how they do and determine whether or not you really need to speak after all. And in many cases, you may not. So having everyone have access to the speaker queue is very helpful in terms of keeping the meeting efficient. So now we're back to the moderator's console. The moderator is seeing that we're looking at Article 11 main motion, and the moderator has decided it's time to initiate a vote. So she clicks the vote button down at the bottom, and when she does that, every remote participant sees this. Article 11 main motion, your vote, 30 seconds remaining, and that will then count down. Now, the 30 seconds is a number that we use at Wayland for on-premises voting. That number can be whatever you like. So if you want to spend more time allowing people to vote, that could be 60 seconds or 45 seconds. If you think your group is really efficient, it could be 20 seconds. I wouldn't go much below 15. So everybody gets to vote. The last button you push is the one that counts. So if you push yes, you voted yes. If you change your mind during the window, you can vote no. If you actually didn't want to vote at all and you want to retract a vote you accidentally made, then you can click the abstain button. So when you finally do click, you are told that you voted yes. So you have confirmation that you voted and your vote was submitted. And now you've seen the third part of full participation in town meeting: listening, speaking, and voting. So now let's move on to the second impediment to remote participation, and that is what happens if there's a disconnect? What happens if there's a power failure or a power pole comes down or something? What happens if there's a denial of service attack where some adversary, for some unknown reason, wants to disrupt the meeting? Will that actually happen? Probably not, but we have to be prepared for it. We have to be able to detect it. So the remote participation webpage will be designed so that for each connected participant, it will once every, I don't know, few seconds, once a minute, send an I'm here message to the town meeting system. So as a result, the town meeting system will constantly know how many people are currently connected. It monitors check-ins, it monitors intentional departures, and so it can tell if there has been a unintentional loss of many connected participants. If a whole lot of people leave at the end of a controversial article by clicking the leave button, well, that's expected. That's not a big deal. But if in the middle of a discussion, 25% of the audience suddenly disappears, the remote audience, that's a problem, and the moderator would be immediately informed. Now, what do you do when that happens? You have to figure that out ahead of time. The moderator has to decide what the town's continuation policy should be and publish it well beforehand so that everybody knows what to do if it happens. For example, it could be if you get disconnected, we're going to suspend the meeting for 1 hour so that everybody who can get in their car and come down to town meeting premises. Alternatively, the policy could be we're going to terminate the meeting and wait for another 24 hours and try again the next day. So whatever the policy is, that's what everybody would then do. Like I said, this is not something we expect to happen, but you have to be able to detect it and you have to be prepared for it. And that's how we would handle a widespread internet outage, however it was created. The third impediment is the one everybody thinks of first, which is how do we convey votes securely over the internet? So it goes without saying that all the messages transferred over the internet, the voting messages, would be encrypted, but that's not sufficient. One of the things that's unique about town meeting compared to normal elections is that every vote is resolved in real time. It's not like an election where you're voting all day long, you've got multiple candidates, you've got multiple ballot issues, and so trying to audit anything is really, you can't audit anything in real time. But at town meeting, we can enable every voter to audit their last vote in real time and report any discrepancy before the moderator announces that the vote is final. So remember that when you checked in with the town clerk before town meeting, one of the things written on your piece of paper is your secret audit code. That's a code that only you know. So immediately after a vote, an audit table is made available on your handset and on public web pages. And you basically can scroll or type in the first couple letters of your secret voter code, and now your audit code, and you can now see what vote was received by the voting system for you. And you can verify that that's exactly the vote that you submitted. Furthermore, the audit table shows the arithmetic. So when the moderator announces the result of a vote, she announces the total result, but she also announces the remote vote. She would announce in this case 8-3, I'm sorry, 3-4, 3 yeses and 4 nos, excuse me. And we can see here the arithmetic. So it's very easy for remote participants to verify that the votes are being added up correctly because they just increment every time there's a yes, the yes count goes up, and every time that there's a no, the no count goes up. So every voter's verifying their own vote and the arithmetic of the whole enterprise. And so this is a way to detect any tampering that might occur due to votes being conveyed over the internet. But that's not sufficient. So we go one step further and say the moderator can appoint a set of designated auditors. These are people that she knows and trusts that she has recruited who agree that they will audit every vote that they participate in. They're auditing their own vote, but whereas regular voters, hopefully most of them would be motivated to audit their vote, but the designated auditors agree to audit every single vote, and they report any discrepancies via text message to the moderator's smartphone. So they don't even use the town meeting system to report discrepancies. So the result is we've got some coverage guaranteed by the designated auditors, and as many remote participants as we can persuade to do so are auditing every single vote. So what does that look like for a remote participant? If you're a remote participant, you voted yes, you can click audit, and when you do that, you immediately get the audit table and a report discrepancy button. So it's very easy. If something is wrong, if you voted no and it says you voted yes, you just report the discrepancy and the moderator is immediately informed. So we believe that this approach, where audits precede finalization of the vote, means that we would detect any tampering that might occur as a result of votes being conveyed over the internet. And if that happened, of course, the moderator would not declare the vote to be final. Last one, proxy voting. So this is a little bit more complicated. We had this problem even when we first started doing electronic voting on premises. People were concerned that a spouse, a pair of spouses would come to town meeting, and halfway through the meeting, one would slip their handset to the other in their coat pocket and leave, and the remaining spouse would vote both handsets. So that's proxy voting, where one person is impersonating a second person. Not a good thing. We solved this problem on premises by issuing everyone who checks into town meeting either a handset or a dated visitor card. When you leave Wayland Town Meeting, you have to surrender one or the other. So you can't, if you were issued a handset, you can't leave Wayland Town Meeting without surrendering it. So that's how we solve the problem there. It's a little bit more tricky with remote participation because someone could check in as Dave Bernstein, but then hand off their phone to somebody else who's going to vote it, maybe, to get some article to pass that otherwise wouldn't be the case. So the way that we solve that problem is during town meeting, when we're not voting, the voting system, the town meeting system is randomly selecting remote participants, creating a connection, an audio video connection between a randomly selected voter and a member of town staff, and conducting a recheck-in. And that member of town staff is able to see the still picture that was taken of you when you checked in the first time. So basically, the whole way through town meeting, there are these random recheck-ins going on. You would typically have 3 or 4 members of town staff doing this. And over the course of a town meeting, you would probably end up checking between 50 and 75% of the attendees, depending on how many are there. But the point is that this process deters anyone from doing proxy voting, because the penalty for getting caught is fraud, and fraud is a serious crime. So this is a deterrence mechanism to detect proxy voting to ensure that nobody does it. And that's how we address the 4th technical impediment to remote participation. So in summary, we're starting out with the voting system doing on-premises participation, as Miranda said. We have expanded it with remote participants accessing the town meeting system that allows listening, speaking, and voting via handsets that are either smartphones or tablets. And we provided remote participants what we believe is a friction-free user experience. If you understand town meeting, you can use these devices to fully participate in town meeting. We have a way of detecting a disruptive adversary who somehow causes the internet swamp to get swapped out or disconnected, or there's random power failures. And we found a way to detect a vote tampering adversary by using this audit mechanism. And finally, we can deter proxy voting by doing continuous recheck-ins during the meeting. So these are the 4 technical solutions to the impediments that we identified. So where are we now? As both speakers mentioned before we started, the problem is that remote participation in open town meeting is not legal. So we can't convince the first software development company to build what you just saw because there would be no market for it at present. It's not legal. So what we are doing is working to persuade the legislature to make it legal. And our arguments are summarized here. Making it legal will end the disenfranchisement that all of the earlier speakers spoke of. I won't repeat all the ins and outs, you know them by now. Remote participants will be able to fully participate. It's not just remote voting, it's remote listening, speaking, and voting. It's full participation in town meeting. Because we can audit every vote in real time, we will detect any tampering that occurs if it should happen. We can randomly recheck people in during the meeting to detect proxy voting. And as you've seen, we can provide moderators with a set of tools that will enable them to effectively manage much larger meetings, meetings with 1,000, 2,000, even more people. We want to be able to manage meetings with as many people as want to come, because that's what direct democracy is about. And that's what town meeting is about. So we want to encourage the legislature to pass Carmen's bill, H.2274, because it will legalize remote participation in open town meetings statewide. And as I said, no company will develop the software we need until it's made legal. So we ask that you engage with your state senator, your state representative, ask them to support this bill. This legislative action is absolutely needed. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Nancy, and I'll stop sharing.
And thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Dave. And I'm sure you all have questions. As I said, we're going to take the questions out of the chat instead of doing raise hands because it's just clearer for people to use written questions, and we already have a number. So Jen, if you've been looking at these, do you want to start with asking the ones that were asked early?
Sure. Okay. Anne asks, how many extra staff are needed?
How
So
many extra
the
staff?
the only extra staff needed would be the to the extent you're checking in 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and you want to be able to do that quickly, then you would need maybe 1 or 2 more check-in people that you have usually. And then the same people who do check-in at the beginning of the meeting, the same staff people can do check-in during the meeting. So I did a calculation. I didn't include the slide in this presentation, but if you're paying your temporary staff $15 an hour, which is what Wayland pays, it's less than $1,000 to pay the staff needed to do the administration of what I just showed you.
Great. Do any other states or communities outside Massachusetts already have a system like this?
So for open town meeting, the required software does not exist. Representative town meeting is allowed to do remote participation. And several companies that do on premises have done remote participation software for representative town meeting. And that's a bit of a head start for us. So if we get this legalized, we will start with the software that already exists for representative town meeting. The difference is that most of those solutions are a combination of a remote voting software with Zoom. And the feedback we have gotten from just about everybody doing that is having 2 different mechanisms, one for voting, one for speaking and listening, is just too confusing, even for people who are professional representatives, which is why it's important to do what I've just showed you, which is one integrated system that does everything.
And folks are asking about vendors you could work with. Would a vendor work with you or any other town on a prototype? And would a prototype help get this passed? And
That's
have you reached
exact-
out to any vendors? Yeah.
That's exactly how we did on premises voting. When we started, there were no implementations of town meeting on premises software. There were companies that had clickers that were used by pharmaceutical associations and doctors' meetings and for entertainment on cruise ships, but they didn't have the security mechanisms required. So we contacted 2 or 3 companies. One company in Florida, OTI, agreed to work with us. They were interested in the market for it. And so we worked with them, we convinced them we gave them the requirements, and they built the software to our specification at no charge to us. So they did all the upfront work, and then they produced a solution that worked for us, and we pay them when we use it. But as Miranda pointed out, there are now 70 towns doing this, and there are at least 3 different companies who are competing for that business. Now, since the pandemic, there are many, many online voting companies. I think the last time I counted, there were 50. So the problem will be quickly winnowing down those 50 candidates to a set that are seriously interested in learning how to do this. I have informally reviewed what you just saw with our current on-premises supplier, who also has a solution for representative town meeting, and their view is that it's feasible. So they didn't go implement it, of course, because it's not legal. But their view is, yes, they could build it if we could get it to be legal.
Great. Alyssa asks about a point of order. Point of order should be heard immediately. Is there a way with this proposed system to make this selection jump to the front of the queue?
Yes, if you looked at if you remember the screenshot, it shows any points of order on the moderator's screen. So the minute somebody does a point of order, the moderator would be instantly alerted.
Great. And who is it that enters the local participants in the queue? How are the names known? And what if 2 to 3 people approach a mic at the same time?
So there are a couple of ways to do that. So if you're using on-premises electronic voting like this, right now, the 1 button means yes and the 2 button means no when you're voting. You could make the 4 button means I want to speak in favor, the 5 button I want to speak against, the 6 button I want to make an amendment, etc. One of them could be I want to raise a point of order. And since the handset is registered to you, the voting system would know your name and would be able to automatically do it. So that's the high-tech solution. The low-tech solution is you just put somebody with a tablet in front of each microphone, and every time somebody approaches, you capture their name. I think eventually where we want this to be, not to start, but eventually we'd like it to be that in on-premises, people are also using a smartphone or a tablet. So they would have the exact same interface as people who are participating remotely. They'd just be sitting in the field house or on the football field or wherever and doing their participation using the same sort of interface. That's where it's going to end up, I believe. But we want to start, 1 step at a time, and 1 step at a time means let's get remote participation working.
Great. How would it be determined whether a large drop in remote participants is due to power outage or that they've chosen to drop off without selecting the leave button?
Well, because
Perhaps yeah,
I have to
sorry.
give you a technical answer, and the answer is because
Great.
you can catch a browser's button. If the user closes the web browser, we can interpret that as an intentional leave, even though they didn't click the leave button. Whereas if they basically disconnect without ever closing the browser or closing the browser tab, then we know that's an unintentional disconnect. Would you like to see the
How
source?
are
I'm
how
teasing.
are amendments to articles made and voted on with this method?
Repeat that again.
Sure. How are amendments to articles made and voted on with this method?
Well, one of the buttons that shows up when you click request to speak is amend. So you click the amend
Great.
button, and when the moderator recognizes you, you make your amendment. Did I not understand the question?
That question
I think-
was to Sharon's comment about voting in Minnesota.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you.
Did I answer the question? I guess I did.
Okay, we can go to
I
another
think
one,
they,
although.
you
oh,
basically
sorry.
do it the same way you do it at town meeting now. You propose
Yeah.
the amendment and discuss it.
Exactly,
Just doing it from your house.
right, from your kitchen.
Great. Although large numbers of remote attendees don't absolutely mean more speakers, it is very likely to happen if the attendees increase by hundreds, if not thousands. How do we discourage people whose priority is efficiency rather than fair and careful deliberation from calling the question before the majority of speakers have had a chance to comment?
I'll say that that's a challenge at a town meeting at any scale. And we have that problem even when there's 500 or 600 people. I think that there's a lot that can be done to make town meeting more efficient. And frankly, Wayland Select Board has done a pretty good job of that over the past couple of years. And that is to do a lot of work to enable people to understand each article before they even show up at town meeting. So you can encourage article advocates to hold public meetings to discuss their articles so that people can be informed and educated. And if they have concerns and questions, they can ask them and get them answered outside of town meeting so that the discourse at town meeting is limited to that which only can occur at town meeting. You know, at our town meeting, sometimes people just stand up and ask a question. What does this really mean? Somebody asked me at our last town meeting when we were endorsing remote participation, well, how's that going to work? And we then spent 15 minutes talking about remote participation that really didn't need to happen had we had a public meeting about it. So yes, you know, as more people participate, there will likely be more discourse. But if we work hard to make it efficient, put a lot, you know, exploit social media, exploit the web so that we can disseminate lots of information beforehand, I think we can make it manageable.
Great. Are you concerned that fewer people will attend in person and choose to participate remotely? Will that create more of a burden for a moderator?
I think that's a possibility. I took a poll on Wayland social media, and the results kind of indicated that that might happen. I don't think that's a problem at all because everybody gets to participate whether they're remote or on premises. So there's no problem one way or the other.
Great. Are auditing and recurring check-in must-haves for an RPV system? Against a benchmark of raised paper ballots, Zoom surveys can deliver a similar voter experience with similar security guarantees. I'm wondering if we can make do with a minimal system compared to a full-featured bespoke system.
What was the alternative that could do this? I didn't quite catch that.
Zoom surveys.
Zoom surveys. Um, I guess my view would be that we and lots of other people I know would not consider that sufficiently secure.
Great.
Because the votes can be tampered with. And I don't think Zoom survey alerts you when some of your participants have been disconnected because a car ran into a power pole.
Mm-hmm. Have there been claims that remote participation discourages debate?
What was the first part of the question?
Have there been claims that remote participation discourages debate?
No, the claims are quite the opposite. The concern is that there'll be more debate because there are more participants.
And then Claire asks, amendments are written only in Concord. Would people type the amendments on their device?
Every town will have to decide how to deal with issues like that in terms of requiring, you know, a written amendment. Do they want to be able to accept an amendment that is basically transferred in? That could certainly be done in the system that I just showed you, where if you have created a text file that has your amendment in it, you could push a submit amendment button and it would submit it to the moderator. If that's something that a particular town wants to do, that could certainly be implemented.
Great. And related to random rechecks for deterring proxy voting, what would happen if someone was found to not match the picture?
At that point, that person would be disconnected by the member of town staff. And I'm not an attorney, so I don't know what the legal implications of that would be, but we would certainly take action after the fact. But they would be immediately disconnected.
I think that covers most of the questions in the chat, actually. Nancy or Dave or Miranda, if you have any other questions that you felt.
I did see a question in the chat that said, how does the moderator keep, with remote participation, town meeting from being unreasonably long? And as you know, in every town handles town meeting a little bit different in terms of length of time that speakers are allowed to speak. That wouldn't change anything. That's up to the town to determine how long debate is open for. And in fact, somebody can move to extend debate to be longer. So that's unique to each town on each warrant article.
I think also someone asked, and you may have sort of answered it, the same system could be used for electronic voting with people in person in the hall.
Yes, correct.
So that
That was
you,
mentioned, yes.
yeah, everybody's
Yeah,
device.
the only challenge with that is you have to have enough Wi-Fi bandwidth on premises to handle all those handsets. Now, there's 50,000 people in Gillette Stadium using Wi-Fi at the same time,
Mhm.
so that's a solved problem.
There any other questions that weren't answered or asked that people had that we may have missed in the chat?
I asked, how does the audit happen where you have assigned people to do an audit in addition to people auditing their own votes? How do you know how people have voted in order to verify that the count is accurate?
The designated auditors are only voting their own vote, auditing their own vote. So no person can audit a vote other than their own. But the key is that the designated auditors, they are promising to audit every single vote that they make. Whereas the general population, we'd like everybody to audit every one of their votes, but we can't be sure that they will.
Does the Massachusetts Moderators Association endorse the bill?
I can answer for that. And I see Mark DeSalvo was on. I'm not sure if he still is. He's the chair of Mass Moderators Association currently. It hasn't taken a position yet. We're hoping to get this presentation before them as well.
What do you think it would cost towns to implement the system?
So I don't know. I can tell you that for on-premises town meeting, Wayland typically pays OTI between $30,000 and $50,000, depending upon how many people show up. We're talking about software that has to be developed, and I propose that we don't pay for that, that a company would build that on their own dime, and then recoup their development costs and make a profit by basically selling online access. So I don't know what they're going to charge. I can only tell you that the ballpark for Wayland for 600 voters has been typically $30,000 to $50,000. And that's kind of the range we would expect for this. So if we double the number of voters, you would expect the cost to go up. But would it go up linearly? I can't say.
I'm seeing a question about the Mass Municipal Association endorsing the bill. The Mass Municipal Association is co-sponsoring with us this presentation in a couple of weeks for the legislator as a legislative briefing. So yes, the Municipal Association supports the bill. It supports having remote and hybrid open town meetings.
And do you know about the Massachusetts Select Board Association, Nancy?
I don't know. We haven't been in touch with them.
TBD. Great.
Yep.
And then Caddy had a proxy voting question. How do you ensure someone isn't using someone else's password? I think you spoke to this, Dave.
Yes. So if someone, shares their password, that's proxy voting. And, if somebody else other than me shows up on premises town meeting and says they're Dave Bernstein and lives on Gleason Lane, and nobody around notices it, well, that person impersonates me at town meeting. So we can't stop impersonation. Massachusetts law doesn't allow us, nor should it, in my opinion, to check fingerprints or other biometrics. So if there's some forms of cheating that town meeting just can't detect, because to do so would be cause more harm than otherwise. So if somebody shares their password and lets somebody else use it, well, we might catch them when they check in if the person checking them in knows what they actually look like. But if no one notices it, it would be no different than someone checking in, impersonating me on premises.
Alyssa asks, what problems have RTMs faced when using remote participation and how have they solved those problems? Is there coordination between the development of this proposal and their real world experiences? Yes,
So
that's what you're sharing with us now.
I have spoken with several moderators who have been of representative town meetings using electronic voting to do it. The moderator of Plymouth, Steve Trefetti, was particularly helpful, and he emphasized the fact that a single system, as opposed to Zoom and a voting mechanism, was pretty much essential because his representatives always had trouble using the right one at the right time. So he really confirmed our design choice that we want a simple, easy to use system that combines all of the activities that a remote person would participate in, speaking, listening, and voting in one application.
I think we've done most of the questions. We'll send the chat to Dave, and if there are any questions that he hasn't answered, he can get back to you. But I'm gonna go to the end of this now. A recording of this presentation will be available on the LWVMA website, which is lwvma.org, in the next day or so. The ask for all of you attending is to please call or email your state senator and state representative and ask them to support H 2274, an act authorizing remote participation in town meeting. All legislators are going to be receiving an invitation Thursday to attend a similar presentation on the one that you've just seen. So if you could mention to them that you would like them or their staff to attend our presentations, it's Monday, July 21st at 2 p.m. on Zoom. They will get an invitation. Urge them to attend. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Dave and Miranda, for a great presentation.
Thank you.
I hope you found it interesting. I hope it raised some questions and some possibilities in your minds. And, I'm sure the systems will change from what Dave has presented, but until we start working with it, we won't know how changes or what we need to do. But towns can develop this as we go on. But first, we've got to get something in the works.
And Nancy, if I may just add that supporting this bill doesn't require a town to have remote participation, but it gives
No.
those towns that would like to try this the opportunity to do so. So
Yeah, it's optional, not mandatory.
correct. And it really, this is as all town meetings are, it is on a town by town basis. Each town has their own unique town meeting.
Yes, every town meeting is different. So
Great.
we
Thank
will
you, everyone.
thank you for coming and hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you all for the
Thank you.
time.
Good night.
Thank you. Really appreciate everyone's time.
Yep, really appreciate it.
Take care.